providing employees with these tools can not only provide them with a better experience and provide employee delight, but it also provides the organization very rich data and insights, such as who's coming into the office, who's reserving space, trends in different utilization across departments or locations, getting back to that rich data that you need to make strategic portfolio decisions.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you are ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. In today's episode, Hanna, Graziano, and Robert Norin from FM Systems discuss the evolving landscape of office spaces and the changing technological needs of organizations as they transition back into the office. They delve into the various trends and considerations surrounding office spaces, technology, employee experience, sustainability, and facility management in the post-pandemic era. Now, let's get into it.
My name is Rob Norin. I've been in the industry over 20 years, joined by Hanna Graziano, and we're going to be talking through what we expect to see in the future workplace today. So, Hanna, you and I have worked together a long time now, almost the better part of a decade, and you in particular have the opportunity to speak with a lot of people in our industry, facilities and space management, real estate professionals on a daily basis. One thing we've been hearing, again and again, is the back to the office, or companies wanting to have either a few days a week for employees, or maybe at certain employees, certain locations. I've heard a bunch of challenges, but I'm really interested to hear what kind of top challenges or big challenges are you hearing about, or roadblocks, and what are you seeing often?
Yeah, great question, Rob. And it's really evolved over the past few years, right? I mean, the world has changed a lot in the last 3 years. The way that we interact with our workspaces has really kind of just been turned upside down. So I think if I had to pick out one thing that kind of stands out the most, while it seems simple, I think it's really a lack of understanding of what space a company has and how it's being used by their employees. They may have an idea of how it was used 3 years ago, prior to the pandemic, when employees were in the office much more frequently. But now as they're coming back to the office, understanding what employees are in which locations, what needs they have as far as when they come into the office. And without kind of that critical space data, understanding that, it's really hard for organizations to make strategic decisions, let alone on their portfolio, the technology they use to enable it. So yeah, I think that's what sticks out the most. Curious what you've been hearing, Rob.
A lot of the same. I think people had an idea of what they were going to try and do as a result of people coming back to the office. And a lot of times it shifts as we've seen people and getting used to working from home and things like that, not wanting to come back. We had the great resignation, right? I guess my big question is, are you seeing a trend in technology that's lacking for the companies and folks you're talking to? Are they missing something, or do they generally have things in place? It's just not the right setup, or what are you seeing there?
That's a great point, because really, when you think about some of these global large organizations down to your medium or smaller businesses, a lot of them may have had technology in place that was maybe segmented, but not giving them a holistic picture of the portfolio, or maybe they had a great system in place. But as the landscape has evolved and organizations are really coming back into the office, I think the use of those systems, or how they need the systems to function, may not be up to par as it was previously. And I think that's something that we'll continue to see, changing technological needs, and as we uncover how individuals will come back to the office. Curious if you're seeing any differences.
I'm seeing a lot of trial and error seeing what works, and
Mhm.
it's picking up bits and pieces, and also people looking for what is working across different areas of their portfolio, right? One size doesn't fit all, even within a company. I've seen a lot of changes in the way people find and reserve space. I feel like 3 years ago, we just booked. I mean, we were always in the office. You and I were in the same office, right? And what
Mhm.
we would do is book an Outlook room or a room in Outlook, and more or less, most people were there with us. And if not, then we could
Mhm.
add in virtual meeting. So I think that's going to continue to evolve because it's not the same anymore, right? People may or may not be in the office, right? They may be at a different location. It could be remote or different time zones, so on and so forth. I think we've done a lot of hiring, or a lot of companies have done a lot of hiring that the virtual experience is expected, or the virtual work life is expected. So I think we're going to continue to see that just change and fit the needs as they come up. I
Mhm.
do see a huge increase in the demand for what I would say is pretty traditional space management, and also a lot more focus on assets these days. And I mean, you can consider space an asset for a company, but assets as far as equipment for individuals or building, supporting building equipment. For instance, do they have the right setup for workspaces or touchdown spaces and conference rooms? Because what I've heard is chairs are disappearing, docking stations, monitors, things like that, and it's really hard to keep track. So one of the trends I'm seeing. I'm curious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what are you seeing people focusing on when they're looking for software now? Are they making a change? Are they looking to enhance? What's your take?
Yeah. Kind of piggybacking on what you were just speaking about, you mentioned previously when we were in the office, it was typically that if you're in the office, you're going to have an in person meeting or you're going to have a virtual meeting. I think now, really, every meeting is expected that there may be some people in person, there may be some people remote. So it is really critical being able to support a holistic technological environment where maybe we have some employees who are using PCs, others are using Macs. So having an environment or the setup in the office where they could all use or know which room work they would be able to leverage with their technology. So I think that's a big thing is the employee experience. And I think we're going to get further into that. But the other primary focus that I think that was starting to become relevant within the past 5 to 10 years, but really has kind of taken off in recent years, is a focus on sustainability. And whether that means tracking the organization's own emissions and waste and making sure that they're making decisions that are responsible for the environment, but also in how or how organizations provide safe workspaces for their employees. Coming off of the pandemic, we really saw a really close focus on making sure rooms and our workspaces are sanitized. And I think everyone's had enough talk about that. But I think another unique use case, and actually a client that I was speaking to in California recently, they're starting to roll out environmental sensors that track their air quality, their noise levels, the light levels, all of the above. And the reason that they started down this path is due to the recent California wildfire. And some employees have apprehension to come into the office if the air quality is poor or they say that it's better at their own home. So as a way of making employees feel safe, enticing them back to the office, they're starting to roll out live dashboards that any employee could access and see what is the air quality. So I think that's, and I could go on and on about this, but I think that's one of the biggest shifts is that sustainability and kind of the cleanliness of our buildings and how we impact the environment is definitely more so at the forefront than an afterthought at this point.
I agree. I've heard a lot of interest in the environmental sensors. We provide those sensors. We have Air Things who does a really great job with that as well. And I actually heard a funny story recently that a company was trying to push to have employees install them at their homes, right? So they can give peace of mind. I don't think that was ever really viable, but it is taking the idea that, hey, this is important. People do care. And
Hmm.
just that hey, do we have the right environmentals or oxygen levels, right? People work better. It makes a lot of sense. So I'm certainly seeing that. I guess that kind of goes into the employee experience. You mentioned that before, and
Hmm.
enabling people to thrive in a hybrid workforce, right? I'm also seeing ease of use, few clicks, intuitive solutions.
Hmm.
And I think of a hotel, right? And the modern office work environment, right? When you go to a hotel, you expect that you can check in, and you also expect a certain amount or can count on a certain amount of standardization, right? And
Hmm.
accommodation. So I can book the room the same way. I can expect when I get there, there'll be internet, that there'll be coffee, hopefully. There's some cutbacks. Talk about that another time. But also, if I'm missing something, right, I know who to call. And I think that's what
Hmm.
people are really looking for now as they're starting to move back into the office and in what they will expect going forward. And would you agree?
Yeah, most definitely. The hotel analogy immediately brought to mind that some recent questions I have with clients actually come up. We want to provide that holistic employee experience, and things like a way for them to order from Uber Eats or Grubhub, things that I would have never dreamed about being a part of a workplace or a workplace management conversation. But it's really shifting the focus onto how can we get people excited to come into the office, and what tools and solutions can we provide so that it's a superior experience. I think gone are the days of having a stocked kitchen and that's what entices you into the office. But yeah, I would say most definitely that need for a seamless employee experience is definitely at the forefront. And I think on top of that, the enabling employees with these tools can not only provide them with a better experience and provide employee delight, but it also provides the organization very rich data and insights, such as who's coming into the office, who's reserving space, trends in different utilization across departments or locations, getting back to that rich data that you need to make strategic portfolio decisions.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing, if people always get caught up in what I like call fancy dashboards, right? And you can have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of really nice looking reports and dashboards, but I think a lot of people are challenged with really understanding what that data means. We've seen companies or I've seen companies wanting to have a more consultative approach when it comes to their solutions because they just haven't had to use this type of data before. And with their evolving landscape and how things are kind of shaping up, they're turning to experts, right? There's a lot of companies out there. We're obviously in one of them, but really leaning on the experts, which is a good thing because I think you and I could both agree we've seen when people don't do that and how it may not end up exactly how they like. What do you think?
That's a that's a great point, and it's been very interesting. I think there's different themes that we're seeing and how different organizations do it, but I would 100% agree that now more than ever, companies are leaning into each other, into the consultants or experts, kind of leaning on that. What is the most recent trends that are going on, because it is ever evolving and really more quickly than ever. I think if you're okay with it, Rob, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I think this kind of plays well into the office experience that we've been discussing. Another trend that I've been seeing, my team has been seeing, is the renewed focus on facility management, things such as your work requests. So, kind of that employee experience side of it, of how can I submit a break fix ticket, but then also more of a focus on how our equipment is performing now that we have more people back in the office. Is that something that you've seen at all?
Yes. And I love that you brought that up. So I've been paying attention to this for quite some time now. And obviously I'm not the only one, but if you think about it for I mean 3 years now basically, facilities teams in a lot of cases have been operating in skeleton crews. And in some cases, I mean they've had to reduce the facility staff, the people who are actually operating buildings. Now that people are coming back in and working in the offices and using supplies and requesting certain things, looking for different space, that need for facilities professionals is coming back in a pretty steep demand. So, and it's not just the facilities tickets, but it's the overall maintenance. You think that these buildings really haven't been used in a couple years, right? So the critical
Mhm.
systems, maybe they didn't pay as much attention to, right? Cleaning, it was a lighter schedule than it is now. So having to ramp pretty quick and get people, if you did have to downsize facilities teams, is important. In same goes for preventive maintenance, having the right tracking in place, making sure everything works when people show up. And it also just goes back to the technology that's being used. If you think about it this way, laptops, monitors, cameras, everything we use in our daily work life, whether it's at home or at the office, is now, if it's in the office, probably 3 years old. So I've also seen companies struggle with, hey, what do we actually need to upgrade and to update? And that's not just technology, it's also furniture, right? Things like that people don't think about, but can be really daunting. And that's why going back to the asset piece, making sure you understand, or what companies understand what they have and where it is and what condition it is, becomes important, because that kind of drives what they might invest in, right, to make it a better work experience when they're in the office. But
Definitely.
out of that, do you have any examples you've seen?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, as to the deriving the data from the buildings and using that to make strategic decisions, I'm trying to think of a good example off of the facility side, but I think really the holistically having a better understanding of your equipment and who it's assigned to when it may retire not only helps the organizations forecast better financially, but also understanding how to outfit offices for our employees. From the space planning, kind of real estate planning side of things, I think a big thing that we've been seeing is the use of different modeling or strategic planning tools to either phase reentry as employees came back over the past year, and now restacking or reclassifying some of our space to accommodate hybrid employees. So we may just be shifting departments around, but using those different to then say, okay, this is the best option for us. This is the route we should go as far as the types of space we should have. There's one large banking client that we've been working with recently, and they are doing a big study right now using occupancy sensors. So they are tracking different types of furniture across one floor of one of their buildings and taking that data to understand what types of seating, what types of workstations should be provided for employees, and then using that rich data to roll out. And investing in office furniture is not cheap. So going about it in a way that they know will not only make employees happy, but they're making sound financial decisions. I think those are two examples that really come to mind.
I hear the strategic planning or stacking and kind of what do we have and where all the time. And that's kind of where I started myself. So it's near and dear to my heart. It's challenging though, right? Because there's a lot of things that go into it. I'm actually working with a client right now, and they're pretty sophisticated. They're very sophisticated in the way they're approaching their people getting back into the office and also their real estate portfolio as a whole and kind of looking down the road. It's a financial institution. I will say that they're painfully understaffed. It's a couple people who are tasked with really maintaining day-to-day facilities and real estate operations, which you can imagine is a huge undertaking. One thing that they've done to help kind of understand is taking a different approach on what we might think of historically as a chargeback report and an allocation report based on cost center. So what they're doing is using our system, our solutions to gather the information around who is assigned to what spaces, so on and so forth, but then bringing in data from a badging system and overlaying that, right? So it's a very granular way to look at, say, again, kind of that traditional chargeback report. So it's not just month by month, but how much are you actually using and when, right? which is just as important. But that's compounded by a few things, right? They have ever changing space, right? And keeping up
Mhm.
with floor plans and changes can be difficult, but they've been pretty successful. And it's one of the more interesting use cases and more successful, I think, applications I've seen of the data and the technology they have available. So curious, have you seen, yeah, anything like that? Obviously, it's not exactly sensors that's come up quite a bit, but any other stories that you may have come across using newer technology?
Yeah, well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the aggregating the data from different sources. I think that's really the biggest thing or biggest trend that I've been seeing is how can we leverage and how can we link our different solutions together to alleviate the time and effort spent by the facilities and real estate team, but also to make it easier for our employees to interact with the solutions. I think there's a variety of different sensor technologies that are out there. It's definitely not a one size fits all landscape. And I think those have very unique and great applications depending on what the organization is trying to achieve. So I don't know if I exactly answered your question, Rob, but I think the greater need for interconnected systems is definitely a big trend.
No, I think you're dead on, Hannah. I mean, that's part of every conversation I've been having, at least for the past year, right? Is being able to
Mm-hmm.
connect to different systems. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Looking forward, what is an area or a solution in a particular area that every company of any size needs to have in place, or maybe there's a top three as it relates to real estate and facilities? What's your
That
opinion?
is a hard one. I think I can do a top three. So we've spent a lot of time talking today about employee engagement and employee wellness, providing tools that make the employee feel engaged with the organization, a part of the organization's mission. And I think there's a large part that facilities plays in that, in the culture of the office and how the office is used by those employees. So I think that's definitely a big one, employee engagement. I may be biased, but I think that without a solid real estate and space planning solution, it's very hard for an organization to make financially sound decisions around their space and around acquiring or getting rid of space. Um, and then I think if I had one fringe one, we're hearing a lot about AI and how it's starting to play into a variety of industries, your everyday life even. And I expect to see much more done there in the facilities realm as well. But curious what your top three would be if they would be different.
Well, I think if a company doesn't have a way to track their base and uh, keep it updated in a sustainable way today, that's something I would go out and get. I would make sure that the employee experience apps, right, being able to find the right contacts, submit tickets, reserve rooms. I mean, I think about my personal experiences showing up in our own office and having to try and find batteries for my mouse or something like that, right? I didn't even know who to contact and are running out, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
how to reserve a room, which obviously I know how to do that in our office. But I think you're right. The AI component of this is going to be critical. We expect it, right? Just in our everyday life. I think it's becoming so common that we get suggestions on here's what you should do, whether it be from an online ordering platform or anything else. We do expect a certain level of intelligence behind our technology. And I think we're going to see, especially in the United States, who's been slow to adopt sensors and actually tracking of folks and how they move throughout a facility, is going to pick up a lot. I think that's going
Mm-hmm.
to continue to pick up. I will say there is one thing that kind of came top of mind as we were going through that. One thing I see people struggling with a lot is simply floor plan management, whether it be AutoCAD or Bentley or Revit, keeping those things up to date, knowing where they are, keeping them up to date, general management, and then actually applying them and making use of the data. Therefore, we've seen a big increase in requests for our company or others to actually take on that task for folks, because in a lot of cases they don't have that in-house experience, and we're seeing a lot
Mhm.
of changes in layouts and how space is set up, right, than we did
Mhm.
3 years ago. A couple thoughts off the top of my head, but I don't know what
Yeah.
else. I mean, have you been seeing?
So the one thing that I'll add there, thinking about the floor plans, definitely agree with everything you've mentioned. I think another thing that we hadn't necessarily seen before, but are definitely seeing more recently, is making the floor plans, I don't know if more user friendly is the best way to say it, but more of the end user. So thinking about how can we add icons to show where different amenities are provided, or can we color code by department so employees know where they should go, what neighborhood or zone they should go into at the office. I think that came up occasionally before, but I think that again, just thinking about the employee experience. So I would definitely agree with that. And I think my biggest takeaway from our conversation today is really and I think we say this all the time, the ever evolving landscape of managing our building space facilities. And it's changing every day. But I think that having the right technology in place to scale as changes occur is one of my biggest takeaways. Rob, what about you?
That's a good question, Hannah, and that's a tough one, which is when I usually say it's a good question. I think my biggest takeaway is coming back to the realization that this is not a new topic or a new challenge or a new problem we've had. This problem, or how do we make the best use of our space and make it most appealing for our people, has existed since offices have existed, right? It's just
Right.
the challenge of adopting uh, the best sustainable technology. And I think we've talked a lot about those different options during this call, but the fact that it hasn't changed, I think past 3 years of pandemic, the onset of COVID definitely shifted things and maybe propelled us forward much faster than we expected. But it was going to go that way, right? So it's just that trend we've seen over many years, maybe a little bit accelerated, but it's still there. And well, that's why you and I are here, I suppose.
Flexibility is king, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Rob. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And as always, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast for more incredible content.